Technology touches every aspect of our lives today. It helps us work, learn, play, shop, and do thousands of things at the touch of a button or swipe of a screen. But increasingly, Americans are concerned about their family's privacy and safety, concerned about big tech's unfair business practices, and concerned about the impact it has on our society. That's why we formed the Future of Tech Commission. Over the past year, we've heard from Americans across the country, and they told us loud and clear they want big changes to how big tech is allowed to operate. Across the political spectrum, Americans agree. When it comes to protecting our kids, our safety, and our privacy, it's time for laws that help us take back control.
Changes in public policy cannot easily be made, nor can they stick for the long haul unless they're shared broadly. We want our children to be safe. We want our privacy and our data to be protected. We want to have access to the tools of modern day life in our schools, in our hospitals, and in our commerce. And I think as Americans, we can all agree on that.
This is the most urgent when it comes to our kids and teens. Their lives are more and more connected every day. It's where they learn, create, play, and even just hang out with their friends. Tech companies know this, and they've been able to make a lot of money by tracking, targeting, and mining data from our kids.
Some of my concerns with my kids being on the internet with regards to safety really revolve around me not knowing who's on the other side.
This Wild West atmosphere of unregulated digital media is fundamentally unsafe for our kids. We're recommending a powerful new law for kids and teens that bans three things: collecting data from young people under the age of 16, tracking them to target them with ads, and pushing inappropriate content to young people under the age of 16.
But it's not only kids whose privacy is being violated. Companies are harvesting, storing, and selling all of our data.
Nowadays, unfortunately, private issues is something that is concerning. Every time you log into your computer and you use a browser, they're keeping track of you.
As we have come to learn just how exposed we are, how much of that data is harvested without our knowledge and used without our permission, it may be that we're about at a point of saying, wait a minute, enough's enough.
We basically want Congress to stop companies from collecting data and personal information from people that isn't relevant to the products and services that they're giving them. And we want to stop the tech companies from tracking us around the web without our consent. And we want tech companies to be required to tell us how they use our data.
The unchecked power of big tech does more than simply threaten us and individuals and families. It's damaging our society as a whole. Tech companies make money off of making us angry, spreading false information, and turning us against each other. It's past time we held these powerful platforms accountable.
The documents I have provided to Congress prove that Facebook has repeatedly misled the public about what its own research reveals about the safety of children.
The CEOs of some of the biggest tech companies in the country are talking with lawmakers about the spread of misinformation on their platforms.
We need to be able to hold these companies accountable when they actually make money from spreading disinformation, misinformation, hate speech, and other dangerous content. And to keep up with this rapidly changing tech industry, we actually need new tools and new structures for our government so they can hold the tech industry accountable.
It's time to protect our families, our privacy, and our future. We deserve technology that serves us, not the other way around.
What I hope is that we can have an internet that is reliable, that is trustworthy, that is safe, that is enabling of innovation and exploration, and the acceleration of economic and intellectual opportunity, and that is available to everybody. Because I think what a responsible web makes possible is a modern form of the American dream. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this briefing on the Future of Tech Commission's Blueprint for Action. I'm Deval Patrick, the co-director of the Center for Public Leadership at the Harvard Kennedy School and former governor of Massachusetts. And I'm joined today by my colleagues and fellow co-commissioners, Jim Steyer, the founder and CEO of Common Sense Media, the nation's leading nonprofit focused on kids and tech, and Margaret Spellings, the former U.S. Secretary of Education and the current CEO of Texas 2036. Together, we serve as co-chairs of the Future of Tech Commission. My role today is to summarize our recommendations and to facilitate a conversation among us with our colleagues that is about work we've done together. Over the past 10 months, through town halls and individual meetings, we've met with and listened to advocates, academics, policymakers, tech industry, experts, educators, parents, and lots of other regular Americans. We gathered insights from articles, books, and correspondence, as well as from past congressional testimony. That broad input and their unanimous sense of urgency form the basis of the Commission's recommendations that we make today to the administration, the Congress, and the American people on how best to protect our families, our privacy, and our future. The detailed recommendations can be found at futureoftechcommission.org. Let me first summarize our key recommendations as follows. First, we recommend enactment of a comprehensive federal privacy law that gives consumers, not tech companies, control of our personal data. Second, we recommend updating and strengthening our children's privacy law to better protect children and teens. And in that vein, we acknowledge the legislation introduced today by Senators Blumenthal and Blackburn. Third, we recommend new transparency requirements and accountability for the use of algorithms or other tools to stop the spread of misinformation and disinformation. Fourth, we propose setting up regional public-private cybersecurity centers where information about cyber attacks on government, essential infrastructure, and industry can be shared and responses can be coordinated. We recommend additional resources to address anti-competitive practices in the tech sector. They create undue burdens to newcomers and drive up costs to all of us. And we propose ways to encourage and support continued innovation in the tech industry, recognizing that as we address the excesses of technology, we must balance that by acknowledging the value and importance of technology in our lives. During the Commission's work, the Congress passed and the President signed bipartisan infrastructure legislation, which includes significant new funds to achieve universal broadband. We are excited about that big step forward. It is entirely consistent with our view that every American in every part of America should have access to broadband service in their home, school, and workplace. As a result, we have limited our commentary in the blueprint to how best to assure accountability and equity as those funds are deployed. Again, the complete set of recommendations can be found at futureoftechcommission.org. We welcome your feedback there or on Twitter with hashtag FutureOfTech or at FOTCom. And for members of the media who have specific questions after this event, please reach out to Jason Mayman at jmayman@commonsense.org. We have some great guests joining us over the next hour or so. But before we hear from them, as I said, we're going to have a little conversation with each other about some of the most compelling things that we learned through this process that really moved us to the recommendations that we present today. And Jim, if I may, I'll start with you.
Great.
We got input from many, many sources, as you know, and as I mentioned over the past months. Just talk about some of the things that jumped out at us as we learned through this process, and why the sense of urgency in particular.
Well, thanks so much, Governor. And you know, honestly, what we saw is what we all experience in our own lives, which is tech is everywhere. And we've all lived through 2 years of this pandemic, where we've been in front of screens more than ever. And I think what we saw from Americans of all walks of life all across the country was, A, we depend on tech. It's really important in our lives. And yet, we really want some guardrails. We don't want the tech companies by themselves determining what the rules of the road are. We need strong, decisive, coordinated leadership from the federal government. I mean, that's why we elected those public officials, and we need that. And I think what we saw is the blend of two things. One, the fact that we all love and depend on tech for everything from waking up in the morning to what we are going to watch at night. But then we also want serious guardrails when it comes to our privacy, to our kids' lives, to their safety, and some of the things that have really fundamentally disrupted certain aspects of our lives. And I think what we've tried to do here was put it all together in one coordinated, comprehensive place. I think that was a big thing. People don't want to just hear about one issue like privacy. They want an overall coordinated strategy, and they want our government to lead on their behalf. Right. And so that's where I agree with you. There's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of it's really time for our government to lead. But this is something where America's the world leader on tech, but we need strong, coordinated policy to make sure it's safe and effective for each and every American citizen.
Thanks, Jim. Margaret, through your service as Secretary of Education and your current role as CEO for Texas 2036, and your time in the field as an educator, you bring really deep understanding of the importance of education at every level. And I just want you to say a little bit about what you taught us and what we learned from others about the importance of broadband access for all learners of any age and any location.
Well, and as you both have said, technology has transformed everything, and we depend on it just like we depend on running water and electricity. And it has created and has the potential to create even more opportunity and innovation and continue to hold America as the leader in these issues. The pandemic, as you said, have highlighted really these incredible gaps, these tragic gaps that have kept too many students, too many Americans from accessing e-learning or health or the workplace because of a lack of broadband access. You know, we looked to the federal government in the 20th century to provide universal electricity, and we now need to look to our government, and we're thrilled, as you said, about the recent investments that have been made. But we need to make sure that those investments are made wisely and well so that broadband ubiquity can be a reality for everyone.
Everywhere.
Yes, everywhere.
Indeed. Thank you. Jim, you spent many years focused on making the world online safer for kids. You touched on this a minute ago. Speak for a moment about why that's so central to these recommendations, because it was not just your presence as a co-leader of this, but so much of the inbound we got was around this issue.
I agree, Governor, because you know, when you go out to places like Arizona or Texas or Florida or Indiana, it's interesting because the different parts of the country are different, but the message is the same. It always starts with kids and families. We're all parents, right? I've got 4 kids. You guys are parents. We know that they are really the digital natives. It's our children and our teens who are really square in the crosshairs. Mm-hmm. They get some of the advantages, but they really deal with a lot of the disadvantages. And particularly this has been exacerbated during the 2 years of the pandemic. And I think we heard from parents across the country that they are really concerned about their kids' privacy and the safety of their data, but also their safety. They're being exposed to content on social media platforms that are completely inappropriate. And we've seen people in very explicit terms talk about the kind of materials their kids are exposed to that makes them very uncomfortable or makes them fear for their safety, messages, images that are wholly inappropriate. And quite frankly, we have not had guardrails up there. And it's sort of been a Wild West mentality out there for kids. And no parent wants that situation. And so what I think we've tried to do as a commission, and that the 3 of us have really agreed upon, is that we need a comprehensive and coordinated set of protections for kids when it comes to privacy and safety online. And as you mentioned earlier, I mean, there was major new legislation introduced today from 2 senators, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Blackburn, who we're going to hear from shortly, that focuses on kids' online safety. But parents all across the country are worried about social media platforms, the body image issues, all the kinds of stuff that we all care about. And the good news is there's bipartisan support for comprehensive action. And look, we need to put rules of the road in place so our kids get to take advantage of all the benefits of technology, but get protected from all the downsides. So I think that's a central message of what we heard, but also what we're saying to the American public today and going forward.
Jim and Margaret, I want to stay on this issue of privacy because I think I can speak for Margaret and me as not the techies. Originally on this commission, we were. It's shocking, frankly, when you begin to appreciate just how intrusive the platforms can be, and many of them are. And, I remember we had conversation about how, are we just talking about the inconvenience of ads that we don't want, just drowning in that? And we began to understand the imposition on our, and the threat to our kids' personal safety, issues of body image, their, destructive behavior, sometimes violent images, and the ways that our information is mined in order to target that to us, to particular audiences. And so, Margaret, I want you to talk a little bit about the recommendations we're making and how they go at that issue, the harvesting and mining of information, and then the targeting of inappropriate material based on those.
Well, as you say, I think we were surprised to learn just how much this goes on and how dense and how deep it really is. And I think, you shouldn't have to be a computer scientist to understand what are you signing off on or signing up for when you simply want to make a purchase or access a service. And so we need a comprehensive federal privacy law that allows us to be in charge of the information that belongs to us. That's why we need to require these companies to stop tracking us without our knowledge and our consent, to stop collecting information about us that is beyond the scope of what we seek, and let us control our own data and our own information that rightly belongs to us.
And so much agreement on this, not just from the people we heard from, but from the polling.
Absolutely.
Right. Let me turn, Margaret, to cybersecurity. Even as we were doing our work on this project, we watched as governments and companies, hospitals were dealing with the consequences of hacking and ransomware. And other kinds of cyber threats. Talk a little bit about what we learned there and how what we learned about some great responses.
Yeah, right now we're learning that the hackers are winning a lot of the cybersecurity battles and wars, and it's time to make this battlefield really a priority for our country. In Texas last summer, we saw the attack on the Colonial pipeline that really impeded the ability for people to get gas and to power their homes, disrupted businesses and commerce and whatnot. That's why we need to invest in the hardening of these defenses through our various security agencies, federal homeland security agencies that can handle these things. And we need to invest regionally and locally so that cities and counties and businesses can work more collaboratively together and stem the tide of this hacking. Failure to act quickly on this really does put our country and its security at grave risk.
And cost us billions of dollars.
And cost us billions
I think
of
it was,
dollars.
what was billions just in the last year.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. One thing we heard over and over was deep concern about the misinformation and disinformation that's just flooding our online platforms, really poisoning discourse and threatening our society in our future. And Jim, I'd just love for you to talk a little bit more about some of the things that we all learned and took away from that and that show up in our recommendations.
I agree. It was an extraordinary learning experience for all of us. It really was. And, going through the pandemic of the past couple of years, we've seen this misinformation and disinformation issue just be so front and center because of the misinformation about the pandemic and about COVID-19 and so many. This is the biggest public health crisis of our lifetimes. And then you've had platforms spreading a variety of this completely false things, misleading people, creating dissension in the public. This is really a problem. And it's interesting. We've also seen our elections hacked by foreign powers. We saw the Russians hack our elections on multiple occasions, really interfering with the basic electoral system, the basic institutions of our democracy, which was designed to actually disrupt our democracy. And this was enabled by some of the very tech companies who profited wildly off of that, by the way, which is really just not okay. And I think it's interesting because I think we've all seen this, no matter what our political viewpoint is, we've seen that this has spread and that you have to look at Facebook and some of the other social media platforms as central to this. And it's interesting because we all agree that we have to protect the free expression rights of all Americans. That's sort of core to our society. But we also need to hold these platforms accountable. And talking more in political and legislative terms, we've heard a lot in the last year or so about Section 230 and the fact that it has protected the tech companies from being held liable from spreading misinformation, disinformation, falsities, et cetera. But the truth is, we all agree, and we've recommended that 230 has to be amended. But that's just a start. And one of the things that we all agree on is you can't look at something like misinformation in a vacuum. It is completely connected to the privacy issue that you and Margaret were just talking about. And we do need a fundamental, comprehensive federal privacy law, because in many ways the misinformation is a symptom of a disease, which is our data is collected without our knowledge and is spread by algorithms, whatever they are, far and wide, and yet we don't have any control over how we are being targeted with this, and oftentimes really falsely. So in addition to amending the laws that were written 25, 30 years ago, we also have to put up clear transparency requirements. We have to have guardrails around the major social media platforms and ultimately address the root causes in a coordinated, comprehensive fashion.
It's so interesting because for me, this was a real, this was an eye-opener. That it's not the speech alone, or even mainly, it's the reach. And you may have a right or an expectation anyway of freedom of speech. There is no right or expectation, should be, to freedom of reach.
Correct.
Limitless reach, and our recommendations around the limitation of data go right to that. So, thank you both. Thank you both for the incredible honor of working alongside you and learning alongside you, and doing our real best to present some thoughtful consensus recommendations, really from a broad sources of information and insight. This all came through in the research that we did, that no one law, and I think you were saying this earlier, Jim, or provision can address the complex and really intertwined aspects of the challenges we face, but they can be addressed. And that's what this blueprint is meant to do. It's a comprehensive set of ideas and recommendations, some for action by the executive branch, some for action by legislative branches, some for action by federal agencies, many by private organizations and businesses, all of us working together. So again, we commend the specific recommendations and in their detail at futureoftechcommission.org. We will need to work across aisles and across sectors and branches of government to get this done. The concerns we heard in creating this blueprint are shared across party affiliation, age, demographics, and geography. And in that same spirit, we're thrilled to see bipartisan commitment already to solving some of these issues in the form of new proposals just made in just today, and some in the last little while. So now I want to turn to you, Jim. And I think it's your turn to bring in some of our extraordinary guests who joined us today.
And this is a real pleasure because I'd like to introduce our first guest, who is the chairwoman of the Federal Communications Commission, Jessica Rosenworcel. And let's say something. She is the first chairwoman ever of the Federal Communications Commission. So not only has she been a longtime leader in this area, but the fact that we have a really smart, strong woman leader at the FCC is a remarkable thing. She has been a colleague of ours for years and a champion for, you were mentioning the broadband issues earlier, for equal access to among all communities, all Americans, to the promise of digital technologies, especially when it comes to young people. And so thank you so much for joining us today, Chairwoman Rosenworcel. One thing I was going to say to you, again, a mom who understands these issues as a parent, we saw extraordinary numbers of our polling data, which we've alluded to, 85%, 80% on almost all the answers across all partisan lines, calling for stronger federal action in a coordinated way to protect our privacy, our families, our future. Let me ask you, my first question is, why do you think the American public, especially parents, feel so strongly about these tech issues? And welcome, we're so glad to have you as our new chairwoman.
Well, thank you for the work you've done with the Future of Tech Commission and for having me here today. As you said, I'm the chair of the Federal Communications Commission, so I'm a technology optimist. I believe in the power of technology to help us connect, communicate, and create. There's good stuff there. But I also recognize that in recent times, I think that technology has shaped us more than we've shaped it. Mm-hmm. And that we can do a better job. We can do a better job when it comes to privacy, a better job when it comes to security, a better job when it comes to transparency. So we understand what's being done with our data and our persons online. And I don't just say that to you as a professional, I say it as a parent, because like every parent, I'm awed by what technology can do for my kids and their lives and their learning and the connections they make. And I also worry that the absence of guardrails makes it hard to parent. In a household where you've got two parents, two jobs, and too little time in the day, it should be simpler to understand how your children engage with the digital world. And so I'm really appreciative of the big picture look you took and how you put families right at the center.
Well, that's great. You know, one of the things that you've been a leader on since you first were on the FCC is what you've termed the homework gap. And as we know, the last couple of years have been really, really tough on American education. Secretary Spellings mentioned that. You know, we've had a major amount of learning loss, particularly among low-income kids and families in communities of color across the United States. And one of the things that we've emphasized in this comprehensive blueprint is the importance of connectivity for everyone, everywhere. And this is something that we're really committed to, but you coined the term the homework gap. Tell us why that issue and the digital divide more broadly matters so much to the American public and to our kids in particular.
Well, it's obvious the kids are our future. And I think it's important to look at the digital divide through their eyes. And years ago, even before this pandemic, I wanted to draw attention to kids who were locked out of the virtual classroom, struggling with nightly homework because they didn't have broadband at home. It just struck me that it was the cruelest part of our digital divide. And it's so different from when I was growing up or you were growing up. You know, I just needed paper, a pencil, and my brother leaving me alone, and I was good to go with nightly schoolwork. But every child, no matter who they live, where, no matter who they are, no matter who they live, no matter who they are, no matter where they live, they need internet access to have a fair shot at success. And we know that there are between 16 and 17 million kids who struggle without internet access at home. And, you know, we can be audacious and say, hey, we can fix that. And with this pandemic, as troubling as it's been, the really good news is that there's now renewed energy to do just that. And I'm proud that the FCC is really taking a hard look at how it can help for the first time in its history.
Well, tell us more about that then, Madam Chair, because this is a really big issue. And as you mentioned, we've got about $75 billion were appropriated in the infrastructure bill to finally close the digital divide. And we applaud that. But you're going to be one of the key leaders in the country to ensure that we make good on that promise. So tell us what that means, how you see that playing out over the next couple of years, because this commission is going to be here to support you. But tell us how you see that playing out.
I really think we are on the cusp of generational change. Like in the 30s, we had it with electricity, everyone, everywhere. And in the 50s, we introduced the interstate highway system and changed commerce and culture as a result. We're going to do that now with broadband. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act gives us really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make sure this infrastructure reaches everyone. And we got to really make sure that we do it well, we do it equitably, we do it fairly, and we make sure that we get everyone online and that we can have their genius contribute to our culture in every single way. Now, I think at the FCC, one of our focuses is not just deployment, which is about getting the infrastructure everywhere. Yeah. It's also about affordability. Because during this pandemic, we've seen lots of families shut off their internet service because they were making hard choices about rent, food, and gas. And so now the FCC is running a program called the Affordable Connectivity Program that helps low-income households get online and stay online. And in less than a year, we have signed up 10 million households, which is something we just announced with the Vice President this week. And that program is here to stay. We're going to keep at it, and we're going to make sure that affordability is not a bar for any family getting online at home.
Well, I will just say on behalf of all of us, number one, congrats on your historic leadership. role. With that, it's really fantastic. It's great to have a mom in charge of the FCC and someone who's worked on these issues for so long. But we are here to support you. And one thing I think we all feel strongly is we've put out a comprehensive, coordinated strategy for the country here in which you're a centerpiece leader. But we're going to be here to work with you over the next few years to make sure that our recommendations are actually implemented. And you're going to be a critically important role in that. So thank you so much for your leadership, for your personal commitment to this for all these years. And we will be working with you in the years ahead, the months and years ahead to make this happen. Bless you and thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I can't wait.
Terrific. So our next set of guests, so we have 4 senators joining us today. And very important, and I think really encouraging, is it's a bipartisan group. We have 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, folks who really, really care about the privacy issues we've been talking about the broader tech issues we've been talking about, but who have a particular commitment to children. So our next set of guests are 2 senators, both of whom serve on the Senate Commerce Committee, and we're going to be very important legislators in the coming months to enact and pass, so for the president's signature, important privacy legislation for kids. The first is Senator Ed Markey. Governor, you obviously know him well. He's the senior senator from Massachusetts. He was the original author of the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act way back in the 1990s. He and his colleague, Senator Bill Cassidy, the senior senator from Louisiana, a strong Republican leader, and a physician, by the way, are now the co-authors of COPPA 2.0, COPPA being the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which is designed to update the kids and teen privacy laws that we've been talking about. And both Senator Cassidy and Senator Markey are reflective of the fact that this is a bipartisan consensus that we need to move this forward at the federal level. So let's hear from Senators Markey and Cassidy.
I just want to start off by thanking the Future of Tech Commission for its work. Reports like this are helpful to us who are thinking about new, different laws to protect online privacy. So, and I will just point out that your recommendations on privacy for children align with those of Senator Markey and me.
Thanks to the Future of Tech Commission for all of your efforts to help to chart a path forward on technology and telecommunications policy in our country. Thank you to Senator Cassidy for your partnership with me. I'm just absolutely sure that if we make this bipartisan, we can be successful and we can get the Children and Teens Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA 2.0 passed. So, Senator Cassidy, what concerns you most about the internet today?
It is amazing how much data is being collected without our knowledge. And I point out to folks that probably your phone location data knows more about your day than your spouse does. Reports that people can type in something, then delete it, never search for it, but nonetheless, that which they typed has been kind of incorporated into the profile of who you are. Now, this is true of adults. It's also true of children. And partly it's the regulations that haven't kept up with the innovation. It's an incredibly dynamic field. You might say that's impossible, but nonetheless, we should at least make an attempt. And for those of us who would wish to delete our data, there needs to be a one-stop shop to delete, as opposed to having 4,000 data brokers. I have to log on to each one of them, putting in the same information, but in a different format. That is an insurmountable task. It should be far easier for us to delete and ask not to have our data collected. So we don't have that ability. So that's among my concerns about today's internet.
And I can't agree with you more. We've been sounding the alarm on the threats to kids' privacy and well-being online for years. But the combination of the increase in kids' tech use with the pandemic, along with the revelations about how platforms like Facebook harm young users, have increased outrage about these threats to children online by an order of magnitude. And here's the problem. Today, a 13-year-old girl on Instagram has no privacy rights. She has no ability to say, stop gobbling up data about me, stop using that data to power algorithms that push harmful content towards me, stop profiling me so that you can keep me glued to your app, stop. That's what we need to say for all of these young people under the age of 16 in our country. Just stop. And our legislation does that. And Facebook's own internal research shows that 32% of teenage girls said that they felt bad about their bodies. Instagram made them feel worse, and 6% of American teens traced their desire to kill themselves back to Instagram. So for kids and teens, this is a social crisis. For parents, this is a health crisis. And for big tech, this is a moral crisis. And that's why we've introduced our legislation.
Ed, I'm going to ask you a question, my friend.
Okay, sure.
You mentioned some of the important things about children's privacy laws. But kids are on the internet a heck of a lot now. And on the one hand, we can write a whole paper on how isn't that good. My grandson has access to information. He went to the World War II Museum in New Orleans, and now he's just turned on to World War II. And I've got a 7-year-old who wants me to build a Higgins boat in the backyard because he wants to simulate going on to Omaha Beach. There's a lot that's good in there. And we do have a law that was signed in 1998 to protect my grandson. But I think inherent in us passing a new law is that maybe that new law is not adequate for today's world. And I don't know if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, and I think you put your finger right on it. There is a Dickensian quality to the internet. It's the best of information sources and the worst of sources simultaneously. It can enable, it can ennoble, or it can degrade and debase. And what we're trying to do is deal with those aspects of the internet that do degrade, do debase. And so from the perspective of our country, especially over the last 2 years during the pandemic, we can see that it's critical that young people and their parents, deal with the fact that kids under 16 should have an ability to require companies to get consent to gather data about them, to ban ads to children, and to create an online eraser button so that parents and children can tell companies to delete the troves of data that they've collected about young people so that those young people can be exploited by companies for their own profit. So I would ask you, Bill, why is it so important to pass this legislation right now?
So I've seen my 7-year-old grandson. I got a smile because once my son, when he was young, set up my mother's computer. Now, if it said you want to read the privacy statement, click, 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 click. There was no awareness that on the behalf of my mother, he was allowing them to do whatever they wished with her privacy. Now, I think if a child is setting up today a program with privacy settings, is more likely in being impatient to click accept all, as opposed to click through and click on do not track and do not store. So there is, if you will, there's a reason that you don't vote until you're a certain age. And so we are recognizing that below a certain age, there may not be the same concerns that are valid, but just not recognized to keep a company from exploiting your data. Now that begs the next question. Ed, I'm the Republican, you're the Democrat, but so maybe people will think you should be asking me this question, but let me throw it at you because it's a logical question you and I have to defend. Should we depend upon the tech companies to do this themselves, why do we need the government regulation as opposed to some voluntary consortium putting in best practices saying we all pledge to adhere thereto?
Well, I guess the answer is that these companies have had plenty of opportunity over the last 10 years to do the right thing. And what we found in our hearings was that these companies use data to power the algorithms that push dangerous and attention-grabbing content towards children and teens. It's their business model. They make money off of it. Billionaires make money off of exploiting children in our country. So we can't rely upon voluntary when it comes to children, when it comes to teenagers. It's just too risky for our country. We can say one thing about adults, but we should all agree on teens and kids. And so, you know, obviously we're working hard to pass our legislation that will stop big tech from tracking and targeting kids at every turn online, but we're not going to be able to do it unless it's bipartisan. And I do believe this is one area where Democrats and Republicans can come together and just say that we believe that kids today should have the right to develop, the right to grow up, the right to make mistakes without being surveilled and coerced by some of the most powerful companies in the history of the world. It's harder than ever to be a young person today. We have to do what we can in order to protect them from being exploited by these huge corporations. And so that's our opportunity right now. And if Bill Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana, and Ed Markey, Democrat from Massachusetts, can agree on this issue, we've got a good chance to pass historic legislation, needed legislation, to protect the young people of our country online. And it's just great to be able to partner with you, Bill.
Hey, thank you, Senator Markey. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Senators, for your critical leadership and for being part of this program and for your bipartisan spirit. Our next speaker is a tireless advocate for improving our health. And for him, our mental health is just as important as our physical health. Dr. Vivek Murthy has served 2 administrations as the United States Surgeon General. He's been vocal about the mental health crisis facing our young people and the role that social media and online activities play in it. I spoke with the Surgeon General earlier this week about this critical issue. Just watch. Good morning. Hello, Dr. Murthy. I am joined this morning by Dr. Vivek Murthy, our Surgeon General of the United States of America. First of all, thank you for your service to our nation in this challenging time and for your leadership and putting your great capacity and intellect on the battlefield here. We are excited about the Future of Tech Commission report, which is being unveiled. And as we all know, technology is a huge part of our lives and has allowed us to really work and function, especially in the pandemic, whether it's e-learning, telemedicine, or the ability to work as we are now. But there's also a downside, and we see it in mental health implications, the data mining and sorts of things that happen under the hood. And I'm wondering, could you give us your thoughts on what are the implications for the mental health of users like all of us are, especially our students and children?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that question, because the truth is that we have used technology in profound ways. It's pervasive. It has impacted every dimension of our life. Yet, if you look at social media in particular, what you see is that in many ways, we've been running a national experiment with the impact of social media on our kids, and we don't fully know what the results of that are. And I think that's very important for us to figure out the answer to the fundamental question, does social media help or harm our children? What we know from anecdotes, certainly from many parents, and I traveled the country over my years as Surgeon General, I've spoken to many parents, and many of them are worried that social media is harming the mental health of their children. They're not sure exactly what to do about it, but they are worried about their children. I think there's no doubt that social media can be helpful to some children in some circumstances, helping them find community, make connections, stay in touch with old friends. But we also know that some children can be harmed by their use of social media. It can worsen feelings of depression and anxiety, loneliness and isolation among kids. What we need, though, is transparency so that we understand the data that these companies have, that the social media platforms have, as to whether or not it's helping or harming our kids and in what circumstances. That kind of transparency is critical because it'll help us understand how to advise parents so that they can make the right decisions for their children when it comes to using social media.
We have done some recent polling, and there's virtual unanimity with families who think the federal government needs to take a more fulsome role in providing some guardrails and really helping families address this and do what they can do. Talk about the administration's role and the things that you all are doing to help advance this really bipartisan cause that we have. And I think that we all recognize that our laws and policies and procedures have really not kept up with the kind of innovation that's happened over the many years.
Well, I'm really glad you asked that because this really should be an issue that brings together people from all corners of our country. The cause of protecting our children's health and well-being is a cause that should unite us. And what we see with social media in particular, I think, is a need for greater transparency and accountability, but also a need for safety standards. Whenever a product or service poses a risk to the public, particularly to our kids, this idea of having safety standards, of demanding standards for transparency and accountability, these are very reasonable expectations. I mean, I would say even advisable. You know, we have standards for driving a car, for example, and for other activities, because we recognize that when you drive, if you're not following certain safety standards, you can cause harm to other people. We need common rules here for the common good. But again, this starts with transparency. And this is where I do think that the federal government has an important role to play already. We've been talking about this issue aggressively. I issued in July a Surgeon General's advisory on the health harms of misinformation and disinformation, which is one of the ways in which social media can sometimes adversely affect kids and adults. But in December of 2021, I also issued a Surgeon General's advisory on youth mental health, calling to attention many factors, including technology, which are potentially adversely impacting the mental health of our children. But we're not stopping there. We know that there's a bipartisan effort in Congress as well to examine potential legislative solutions to ensuring, again, that we have transparency and accountability. I just testified before the Senate Finance Committee about the need for us to do more from the federal government side and as a society to protect youth mental health. So there's a lot that the government can do, but I think it's also important for us to recognize this has to be an all of society effort, that all of us have to use our voices to shine a light on what's actually happening when it comes to social media and youth mental health, to call for a change. And in many cases, to demand that change, because again, our kids' health cannot wait, and we've got to act now.
Exactly, and we're very bullish on really creating a sense of urgency as you are doing, because 2 years is a long time in a child's life, and so let's get to work as quickly as we can together and try to get some legislation passed in the Congress. And thank you. Look forward to working with you as we travel this road together. Thank you, Dr. Murthy, for your leadership and for your service to our country.
Well, thank you so much, Margaret, for all of your service as our former Secretary of Education. And just thank you again for everything you're doing to help secure and safeguard the mental health of our kids. Appreciate you.
All the best.
Same to you.
Bye-bye. We're grateful to Dr. Murthy for his leadership on this issue, and we thank him for being part of this program. Our next two speakers are working across the aisle in Congress to help protect our privacy and our families. In fact, just today, they've introduced legislation together. They are Senator Richard Blumenthal, the senior senator from Connecticut, a Democrat, chairman of the Commerce Committee Subcommittee on Consumer Protection, and a longtime advocate for tech policy reform and for making the internet a better and safer place for kids and all consumers. Also, Senator Marsha Blackburn, the senior senator from Tennessee, a Republican, the top Republican on the Consumer Protection Committee, who's been working closely with Senator Blumenthal to make the internet safer and healthier place, especially for our kids. Welcome, senators.
Hi, I'm Marsha Blackburn, and what a pleasure it is to join you all this morning. So grateful for your interest in the work that Senator Blumenthal and I are doing on the issues of privacy and children's online privacy. And when it comes to children's online privacy, what I've heard from so many moms and grandmoms like me is they realized during COVID exactly what was happening with their children, what they were being exposed to by big tech platforms. What has surprised them is that big tech does not want to make themselves available to parents, to teachers, to doctors, to moms who are really concerned about the issue of this online exposure from social media platforms. Indeed, instead of working with parents and teachers and physicians, the online platforms seem to want to dispense their PR teams to Capitol Hill instead of their engineers, and they want to hide behind federal law. This is something that really doesn't sit well with parents, and it's one of the reasons that Senator Blumenthal and I have held a series of hearings this year to hear firsthand the negative effects and what is happening to our children online. And it's the reason we have brought forward our legislation. We know that you all are interested in this. We appreciate your support and the work that the Future of Tech is doing to help us accomplish a greater level of security and protection for our children in the virtual space. So thank you for this. We are doing our part to bring to Congress and to give to parents the toolbox that they need to protect their children. And now I want to throw it over to Senator Blumenthal, who is the chairman of our subcommittee on consumer protection.
I want to thank the Future of Tech Commission and all of its leaders, including Jim Steyer of Common Sense, for really providing a blueprint for action that is inspiring, realistic, practical, and absolutely necessary to accomplish. We need to move forward in the bipartisan way that Senator Blackburn and I have been attempting to rally our members on the Commerce Committee to do, with bipartisan legislation that will protect children online. What we've seen over these past months on the Subcommittee on Consumer Protection, which I chair, are the really powerful stories of children taken down to dark places, rabbit holes, by algorithms on YouTube, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, where they have suffered. And those stories have stayed with us in a very riveting and searing way. And we've also heard from the leaders of companies like Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, and the CEO of Instagram. And our conclusion is we can no longer trust big tech to do it on their own. We can no longer rely on these mammoth companies whose profits come from exploiting destructive content, using algorithms that drive that destructive content to children, invading their privacy, taking information from them without their consent, and using that information to target them and other consumers. The Blueprint for Action outlined by the Future of Tech Commission is a powerful guide, and our legislation, I believe, will align with that blueprint in setting forth tools and options for parents to protect their children, limits on the use of algorithms that drive that destructive content, choices for parents to make in safeguarding their children. And of course, an audit so that there's more transparency into what goes into the algorithms and the black boxes. But overall, we need to impose a sense of responsibility, moral imperative through the law that will hold these companies accountable. Because what we've seen from the testimony of brave whistleblowers like Frances Haugen and others who have come forward is the story of exploiting children for profit, making money from this destructive content that creates more addiction, more problems with eating disorders, bullying, and even self-harm or suicide. These stories, the survivors, ultimately are what inspire me to do more and do it better. And again, my thanks to all the leaders in this space. We look forward to working with you as we move forward on this bipartisan legislation. And finally, thank you to my partner in this work, Senator Marsha Blackburn, who has been really a leader with passion and insight. And we have worked closely together, I think, and hope that this legislation will be a model of bipartisan effort to protect children online. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Blumenthal and Senator Blackburn. I mean, this is a pretty special day, and thank you for introducing the legislation this morning. It is completely consistent with what we've been recommending. And actually, I just want to say to the audience, you know, here we have two groups of bipartisan senators introducing legislation, which when put together will be the most far-reaching legislation we've seen in 2 decades around protecting our kids online, their privacy, their safety, et cetera. So we applaud you for that, and we're going to work with you to make sure that's passed. So our final guest is sort of a really, really interesting situation, because once in a while, people come forward in American life who you never heard of before, and yet who, through their own personal courage oftentimes and taking initiative, can fundamentally change a debate like the topic we've all been talking about right now. And obviously, Senator Blumenthal and Senator Blackburn were referring to Frances Haugen, who is quite a remarkable person, and she's out in my home state of California right now. So we really appreciate your joining us, Frances. And we honor your courage. I mean, really, for coming forward. You changed the debate this fall about these issues by making it so real for us. You'll be happy to know, I guess you know this, Governor, that she got her undergraduate degree where you are now a professor in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She's been a very successful product engineer at tech companies. But what we really came to know Frances for is the fact that she blew the whistle on some of the egregious practices at Facebook. And for the first time ever, put out in front of the American public some of the issues that really made it clear that whether you're talking about body image, whether you're talking about misinformation and disinformation that undermines our electoral integrity, all sorts of things, that some of the biggest companies in the world were doing really bad things and hiding it from the American public and the global public. And so we owe a real debt of gratitude. So it's great to have you here today, Frances, to wrap it up. I mean, just a couple of questions. First of all, you explained to the public with a really clear and simple way how Facebook's algorithms intentionally spread, I mean, what I guess we would call toxic, outrageous, false content in order to maximize engagement and basically, therefore, profit for Facebook. And, you know, Facebook, Instagram, other companies have said they're working to address these issues. But you heard the senators talk about this because they're introducing now extraordinarily important bipartisan legislation. Can we trust Facebook and companies to take care of this? Or how would you like to see us, how should we move forward on this?
I don't think it's realistic for us to expect tech companies to change on their own. We got here not because of some malicious plan, like no one set out and was like, you know, pulling the levers to make teenage mental health worse or to give the most reach, the most extreme ideas. We got here because these platforms knew that they could operate completely in the dark, that no one could confirm them when they would say, we're working on it. Remember, the narrative from Meta/Facebook for the last 15 years has always been, we're really sorry, this is really hard, we're working on it. We have to change that. We need to have a different relationship with Facebook. I really believe that as long as the only information that these companies are required to publish each quarter are their profit and loss numbers, we will continue to see similar behavior. Because the way we got here was over and over again, these companies faced small choices between profit and safety. And the additive effect of all those decisions has been what we see today. Until the incentives change, behavior will not change. We need to act now.
And so, Frances, it's so helpful for you to put it that way, and you understand it as an engineer. And we're all Luddites here compared to you, but it's actually really helpful to understand it. In the conversations we've had, first of all, as Governor Patrick mentioned, we had literally hundreds of people present testimony to the commission before we came out with our blueprint. But no one was more compelling in what you told us, and you placed particular emphasis on the impact of Facebook, Instagram, some of the other companies you worked at on children and teens. And we know from our conversations with you, Frances, that this is now what you want to do. You really want to go build an effort about youth empowerment and educating young people about these practices. So a couple of things. One, tell us what you saw about how platforms like Instagram had such a huge and oftentimes damaging effect on young people. But second, how do you see young people being part of the solution going forward? Because we're here to talk about not just the problems, but the solutions. So tell us about that, Frances, because it's really exciting to us, and you've been a terrific leader for all of us. So
I think it's important to understand how product choices are choices, and those choices have consequences. Facebook's own documents said that Instagram was not just bad for kids. It was significantly worse than other platforms. Because while TikTok was about performance and doing fun dances with your friends, Snapchat is mostly about faces in terms of people's bodies. Instagram is about bodies and social comparison. But that's a choice, right? There's many, many topics on Instagram. The fact that Facebook and Instagram together have not come in and made choices, they know that there are ways they can reduce the damage, and they've chosen not to pursue them. One of the examples that is detailed in Facebook's own documents was that they could take a brand new account, so no interests, no friends, can't blame this one on the kids, and just follow a couple of things like healthy recipes, healthy eating. And just by clicking on the content, the algorithms would amplify that interest and lead kids to eating disorder-related content within a couple of weeks. That's not the fault of parents. That's not the fault of kids. That's the fault of choices Facebook made around how their products were designed. With regard to what's the path forward, I really believe that we're going to live in a more empathetic future because I believe in the capabilities of kids and young adults, and I believe in their ability to find solutions to problems. I'm going to be spending a lot of time over the next 12 months doing a college tour to kind of get this off the ground, where I want to make sure we connect with kids about what they think are the best levers for change, maybe pitch them a few, and then figure out what they need, what resources, what other kinds of help they need in order to put pressure on Facebook for change. And all the while, we need to remember that we have a public health crisis going on right now. Kids are dying because of choices these social media platforms are making. And I want the movement to also have a component of self-care. Families are struggling right now because parents did not experience what social media was like when they were kids. Now, this is really hard. And sometimes the advice they give leaves kids alone. When you say, why don't you just not use it? That makes the kid feel like they don't know, it's their fault that they're suffering. I believe there's an opportunity for peer coaching, peer mentoring, where children can help each other, young adults can help each other. And we need to move forward, and I believe we'll move forward together.
Frances, just to end, because it's great having you sort of at the final voice. It really is, because in many ways, we've looked at this as parents ourselves, and we always end up coming back to the kids' theme, just like you heard the senators do, too. That is sort of the unifying bipartisan message that all of us know is important. And so the idea that you're going to be going out, we'll be joining you on some of this college tour, but any last thoughts? I mean, obviously you're going to, I know you testified in front of Senator Blumenthal and Senator Blackburn's subcommittee. That was the first major testimony you did. But we believe that kids are the future, as Chairwoman Rosenworcel said, but that they are going to be part of the big solution. last comment on that, because we really agree with you that this is a collective solution. It's something that touches all of us, but we love the idea that young people could lead. So any final thoughts on that? And then again, from all of us, our gratitude for what you've done.
Throughout U.S. history, throughout world history, we have seen over and over again that young adults play a huge role in shaping the future. The people who are paying the highest costs today for the choices social media platforms are making are young people. The people who are going to face the worst consequences over their lifetimes if we don't make different choices today are young people. I have a lot of faith that we are going to see some amazing things come out of young people working together, both to care for each other and for demanding social media that brings out the best in all of us.
Well, bless you and thank you. And we can't thank you enough for both what you've done personally, but also for being part of this commission and our blueprint. And the best is yet to come. Governor Patrick.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much.
My thanks too to Francis. Thank you for your courage and your leadership. Thanks to you, Jim. Thanks to all of our special guests today, Chairman Rosenworcel, to Dr. Murthy, Senators Markey, Cassidy, Blumenthal, and Blackburn. My thanks as well personally to my colleagues and co-chairs for an extraordinary journey. We're grateful to each and every one of all of you for what you've done in these on these important issues, and to the many, many experts and officials and academics and advocates and regular Americans, and to our amazing commission staff who've supported us so well and who have all contributed to our thinking and these proposals. As a reminder, members of the media who have specific questions for us, please reach out to Jason Mayman at jmayman@commonsense.org. And anyone who wants to learn more can visit the website futureoftechcommission.org. Please read and reflect on the full recommendations and help engage your elected representatives and the White House to get action promptly. You can follow us and weigh in on Twitter at FOTCOM and using hashtag #FutureOfTech to continue the conversation, share your thoughts, and learn more about upcoming commission events and news. Again, on behalf of myself and my co-chairs and friends, Margaret Spellings and Jim Steyer, thank you for joining us today. We hope you'll join us in this urgent effort to protect our privacy, our families, and our future.